Welcome to the Adventures in Learning podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Diane, and I am so excited to welcome our next guest. You know that early childhood is something that's very near and dear to my heart, and Rae Pica is an tireless advocate for the right of families and children and teachers to play and learn with joy and wonder. Rae has consulted with everybody from Sesame Street to Blue's Clues to Head Start, has written more than 22 books, and is just a beautiful presence in the early childhood world. Wonder, curiosity, connection. Where will your adventures take you? I'm Dr. Diane, and thank you for joining me on today's episode of Adventures in Learning. Rae, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Diane. What a lovely introduction. Thank you so much.
I am so excited to have you here. You bring such a wealth of knowledge. I think I want to just start by asking you, over the space of time that you have been in this field as a warrior for children, what have you seen change?
Too much. Too much of it has been going the wrong direction. I mean, not to start off on a negative note.
You know what? Let's start negative and go high. What's going on that we need to be working on?
Well, I mean, as you know, children being rushed into things for which they're not developmentally ready, they're spending far too much time sitting. We're ignoring the research about how young children and the brain actually learn. You know, I mean, Dr. Peter Gray talks a lot about the correlation between the loss of play in their lives and the increase in anxiety and depression among children. And this shouldn't be happening, you know. Teachers on their end, they're being required to teach by script. They're, once upon a time, early childhood was sort of left alone. We weren't taken seriously. I'm beginning to think that was a good thing because now everybody's got their fingers and, the policymakers are all making decisions about stuff about which they know nothing.
Right.
So, yeah, a lot has changed. A lot has changed.
And I know I came from the time and place that I now realize it's sort of on that threshold between the two eras.
Okay.
Because when I ran my preschool, and my preschool is still running, they're celebrating their 20th anniversary this year. I'm not with them any longer, but I'm so proud of them.
Yes.
But when we started on the notion of learning through play. And we were able to still teach literacy and mathematical reasoning and scientific thought. All of that happened by read alouds, through play, and through experiential education. And what I see now as a professor is so many of my students are being subjected to these curriculum that are lockstep and are basically requiring them to teach by script. And children don't learn that way. You lose the teachable moments. And we've sort of lost touch with the idea of the teacher being the guide on the side, the one who's observing and the expert in what the children are learning.
Exactly.
Able to translate that into the next step. So how do we fix this problem?
Oh, gee, just start off with that tough question. How do we fix this problem? We have to keep educating people. I think that it's important that we reach parents because they're getting so much misinformation. They have all, it seems, adopted the idea that earlier is better, and we have to rush the children into reading. We have to rush them into writing. It's a myth that earlier is better. It's actually doing way more harm than good. And play is seen as, this four-letter word, play is seen as frivolous and wasted time. All of a sudden, children are expected, little ones are expected to be productive, know, and achieving. And those are not two words that we should be using with young children. So we have to help parents understand how young children really learn. And maybe, although they keep getting younger and younger, remember what it was like when they were that age, and playing was how they absorbed so much information. We have to let them know that play and movement and experiential learning, those are the vehicles through which nature intended young children to learn. And, we can guilt trip them a little bit too, because we have to remind them that over the course of a lifespan, this much of it is dedicated to early childhood. And we have to give them the opportunity to be young children, to experience the joy of that. You talked about your students being required to teach by script. Where is the joy in that? You're not going to see a child's eyes light up over a worksheet. I'm sorry, you're just
Yeah.
not. And the teacher is not going to be enthusiastic about going into work every day, is not going to be inspired and motivated. I worry a lot about what the young college students are learning these days, because I don't think there are many courses on play anymore. Judging by the dwindling royalties of my textbook on movement and music, they're not, there are no courses on movement and music anymore either. So, yeah, what are they learning?
So maybe let's start with that. If we could craft a way to help educators, families, policymakers understand the importance of play, what do we start with? Let's start by defining why play is important and sort of the benefits of it, because I think it starts in early childhood, certainly, but it carries into the grown up world as well.
It's true. It's true. Last week, if you had been interviewing me, I would have been much more energetic because I had been to musical theater the night before. I got to see Phantom of the Opera, which, and I just the experience of, you know, experiencing the arts had me on a high for the whole week. So you're absolutely, right about adults needing it as well. How do we reach them? I don't know. Again, I'm going to start with the parents because they're voters. And once they understand the importance of play, once they understand that this is how their children were meant to learn and that there's far more benefit to it, I guess we have to focus on the benefits of it. I mean, it's how young children express their emotions and get out any fears and concerns. It's how they learn to cooperate and collaborate and communicate. It's how they rehearse for adulthood. It's everything. It's everything to young children. And if we can help parents understand that, and the reason I say we have to start with them is because they, in large part, pushed for preschools to go academic, right? Because they came to believe, because they're getting all this misinformation that earlier is better. And so they, demanded, they're demanding reading at 2 years old and things like that. So if they could create that change, and they did, a lot of early childhood environments lost play as a result of that. If they can create that change, they can swing it back the other way. We just have to convince them of the necessity. How we reach them, I don't know, but I can say that everyone in your listening audience who works with children is in the perfect position to do that. Whether it's, with newsletters, videos, in my new book, Why Play, I talk about Mike Huber tells the story of bringing out the wrestling mats and filming it and sending that to parents because, rough and tumble play is one of the scariest things for adults. He sent home these videos, and I mean, there are all kinds of apps now, right? That make it so easy to communicate with parents. And they saw the joy their children were experiencing, and they were sold. So it could be as easy as that, and then maybe helping them see, if the children are in the dramatic play area or playing with blocks, they can explain, this is physics, this is the science of balance and all the thing, gravity, all of those things that children are just absorbing through play.
And I think that you have to be able to understand all of the various connections that are going on.
Mhm.
We talk about play, and maybe that's something we need to define for our audience in terms of what play actually is. But, I think about children playing at the Block Center, for example. You've got collaboration. You've
Mhm.
got those social emotional skills because they're having to learn to give and take. They're having to learn impulse control, not to knock over their neighbor's tower. They're learning cause and effect. They're learning
Mhm.
if I push this over, this falls down. But they're also learning social emotional cause and effect. If I take your block, you're going to be unhappy with me and not want to play, and we're going to have to figure this out.
Yes,
Mm.
conflict resolution, communication.
So you've got communication, you've got critical thinking. You could have, and one of the things I love to do with a block center is post pictures of different architects, diverse architects from around the world with their creations and put those up for inspiration and then you put out the supplies and you allow the kids to play. They're learning about shape, they're learning about spatial awareness, they're doing some problem solving and some planning. You're building those real world connections because you're teaching them about a diverse world.
Mhm.
And then you can connect it to various stories that you're reading as well. I tend to do that for me in conjunction with the Three Pigs because the whole idea of construction is a natural, they're naturally dovetailed. But and that's just one example. It happens daily in so many ways. And maybe we don't take enough time to document all of the things that our kids are learning in those moments. And that might be one of the ways that we show people is you're not going to get everything, but maybe you pick one of the things that you're focused on
Yes,
and just follow your kids through a day or a week and spell that out for
yes.
your families.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you just listed so many things. My head is spinning. I love it. It's wonderful. And I love the idea of putting up the photos, the pictures of architects. No one's ever said that before. That's incredible. So you're just linking so many things. And yes, the three little pigs, absolutely. it, it it has so much to offer. And what it's just so sad that so many centers have been required, particularly those in public schools, the preschools and the kindergartens public, to do away with the block center. I I always say that it's easier to imagine that the blinking lights and the bright colors and the fast moving bits and bytes and whatever of digital devices, offer more than something as old fashioned as blocks. But I'll bet you couldn't list as many things with a digital device as you just did for the blocks.
You really can't. And, I know that that's another conversation that we need to be having about intentionality. And what is the intentionality of tech? I'm not saying never use it because there are certainly reasons to use it. Andrew Osborne was my reason to use it. He knows I'm telling this story. He's now 20, but he's the one who was the kid with all the questions. And so he would ask me things like, how many bones are in a giraffe's neck?
Oh
That was the
my.
question that broke me. And that the next day I did have a smartphone, but my answer to him always was, "Let's find out together." And
Yes.
so even when I had a smartphone present, it was a, "Let's look together, let's find the answer," but it didn't stop all the play. It was a, "Okay, now we know it has 7. What else has 7? Let's go and find out." And,
Oh, the
s
wonder of that, the curiosity of that, and it's just beautiful. I was thinking the bones in the giraffe's neck was what broke you. It's sort of like the straw that broke the camel's back, but it was the giraffe's neck. That's right.
exactly, and it was just one of those things where I was like, "All right, fine. I need a little help because I am not smart enough to keep up with Andrew."
Oh my. Well, we don't know everything, but AI seems to.
Well, and that's the other thing is showing them if you are going to model with it, that it doesn't know everything and that it's really important to triangulate your sources.
Yeah.
And you could model that for kids, even little bitty kids, when you're in that information gathering phase. You could say, I found this information here. but I think we should check 2 or 3 other places to make sure it's accurate, and
Yeah.
you're just setting them up for success.
Oh, that's critical thinking. That's critical thinking. And the other thing that you modeled was, okay, now we know it's 7. You put that darn phone down after that. So eh, they do want to imitate the important adults in their lives. So if the important adults are always here, that's where they want to be.
Exactly, and there's so much more to see and do, and I think
Oh,
that's where play can be that powerful thing for kids. We only have a certain amount of time in our lives that we can get dirty and make mistakes, the whole Miss Frizzle thing. And I frankly think adults should be Miss Frizzling all the time too. But that's my campaign on the side. But let's start with our early childhood friends.
yeah.
This is where you're supposed to get messy and make mistakes and model the idea that you can fail and you can
Mm.
learn from it and you can pick yourself up. You're building resilience and you're building empathy and connection. And that happens through imaginative play. It happens through solo play. It happens through, playing with found objects or sticks on a playground. It
Yes,
doesn't have to
yes.
be fancy or
The loose
expensive.
parts. Yes, exactly. Exactly. As we said, it's just such a brief moment in the lifespan. And I think if we don't give them the opportunity to experience that joy, they don't have it to take with them into adulthood when things can get a lot less joyous, when there are problems to solve and conflicts to resolve and all that sort of thing. But yes, when you're talking about, I mean, children need three-dimensional, multi-sensory experiences. Worksheets and digital devices can't give them 3 dimensions or multiple senses to use. It's not like, there are programs, software programs where you can build a stack of blocks with a mouse, a computer mouse or whatever. That is not the same as having them in your hands, feeling the shape of them, feeling the weight of them, testing out the balance and discovering that you need a wide base of support for this smaller tower to stay up. And I mean, that's the way they learn.
And maybe for grown-ups who don't quite understand the analogy, it's the difference between trying to learn how to play the piano on Duolingo and doing it at a keyboard. If you're trying to learn off an app, you're literally playing a video game. You're using one finger to push buttons and try to play a song. Whereas if you're sitting at an actual piano, you are mastering where the keys actually are and what key goes to what note. And so that would be like the difference for an adult.
I didn't even know they had that on Duolingo.
Yeah, there's a whole music as a language thing, which if you're learning to read music is not a bad thing.
Right.
But for the experience, like you said, with the blocks, if you're playing with a computer program to sort of get a sense of how to code, that's one thing. But if you're really wanting to understand how shapes fit together, cause and effect, how weight is impacted, forces of motion, all
Yes.
of that comes from the hands-on experience, I think.
Absolutely. And you talked about shapes, you talked about spatial relationships. Those are pertinent to not just to science, but to mathematics. And, we don't think necessarily that spatial relationships have anything to do with literacy, emergent literacy,
But
but
it
it
really
does.
does. I mean,
Left
the
to
shape
right,
of the
top to
letters.
bottom, shape of the letters, exactly. The curving and straight lines and how they fit together. Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you were thinking about your perfect early childhood classroom, knowing that that thing doesn't really exist, what would be some of the top things you would want to see in there?
Oh, there has to be, a dramatic play center, a housekeeping center. There have to be blocks, open space for movement. Open space for movement, so that the children can experience the freedom of that. And there would be a lot of outdoor space for movement as well, for movement and play. I mean, there's so much that nature can offer, and you don't have to be in the woods. You don't have to be on a farm with acres of land. I mean, bugs are nature. It's got to be a tree or two somewhere around. Trees are nature. The earth is nature. I mean, the sky is nature. So, and we know how much the outdoor light contributes to learning and growth and development and all of that. So, yeah, I would have I just would and lots of books.
Yes.
A quiet spot where they can go when they need to be quiet because it's just so important to have that time when you need it. I just want to see more joy in children's early learning environments. I don't know, thinking about the older grades, which is now trickled down to the younger ones, when it was decided that school had to be a miserable place. Why can't it be a joyful place? We actually have research now about the role of joy in learning. You know, Neuroscientist Judy Willis has said when the joy stops, when the fun stops, so too does the learning. And that is never more true than when we're talking about young children. I mean, they are so excited by learning and discovering and exploring. And then we make them sit and do worksheets or try to manipulate a pencil before their little hands are ready, before their bones have even ossified, when we make them feel like failures because they can't read at age 3, and one mom did email me and say her son's childcare center kept sending home notes complaining that he could not yet properly grip a pencil or sit still. And she wanted to know if a 3-year-old should be able to do that. Gee, Diane, I don't know. What's the answer?
Wow.
I know it hurts my little heart. And then, an instructional coach wrote to me and said she was appalled. She'd just been in a 1-year-old classroom, and I really don't like the term classroom for 1-year-olds, but they were those little ones. I mean, think about a 1-year-old. The little 1-year-olds were being required to sit for 20 minutes to memorize flashcards of letters and numbers.
What?
Yes, yes.
That's absolutely malpractice in
Oh, I
terms of what a
agree with
child
you.
should be doing.
I agree with you.
And I was thinking that calling it a classroom, I get the need to streamline your language, but I've
Yes,
been thinking
yes.
a lot about our school environments, and I think it applies certainly in early childhood, and I think applies all the way up as learning ecosystems rather than classrooms, because when we think about it that way, then we start thinking about what are the nutrients we need to provide? How do we create the best growing conditions for our students?
Ooh. Oh, I love it. I love it. That's another new one on me, Diane.
And so, that's part of what I've been talking about when I talk to teachers and talk to schools is, what are those elements that we need? And I would argue that flashcards are one of those things that hinder growth rather than promote growth. And so I would suggest instead, provide one-on-one attention at age 1, spend the time singing and making eye contact, doing puppet shows, modeling behaviors that you want them to pick up on in terms of social emotional responses.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
want them to have impulse control, give them opportunities to practice it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Play some music and dance with them in your arms if they're not yet mobile. There are just so many things that we can do with the little ones, and they are learning. They are learning from everything. They absorb everything. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Imagine a space where curiosity drives innovation, where empathy fuels collaboration, and where learning feels less like a task and more like an adventure. My message isn't about adding more to your plate, it's about changing how you see the plate entirely. I'm Dr. Diane Jackson Schnorr, and through the power of purposeful play, I equip leaders, educators, and organizations with the tools you need to unlock creative problem solving, deepen human connection, and build resistant ecosystems of empathy and innovation. Attendees will walk away not just inspired, but empowered, with immediately usable strategies to spark curiosity in teams, to lead with empathy, and to infuse learning into their everyday cultures. You'll learn how play isn't child's work, it's the secret weapon of the world's most effective leaders and change makers. This is not a feel-good talk that fades by Monday morning, it's a movement. A shift in how we engage people, solve problems, and lead meaningful change. My talks and workshops are shaped by decades of experience in education and a transformative message that connects across sectors. Whether your audience is corporate, educational, or nonprofit, they'll leave ready to rethink what's possible, both personally and professionally. Because when we learn and lead through play, we don't just change organizations, we change the world. Check it out at drdianeadventures.com. So let's talk a little bit about play in terms of the research, because I do think that's helpful for people to know. What are the long-term benefits of play? Because we're now in an age, we've done a lot of the research. So maybe let's share that with folks.
Yeah, Lisa Murphy in one of her books says, it was probably Lisa Murphy on Play, says that we've done all the research. We have all the research. We can stop, you know, and talking about that and just get down to it. We need to put it into practice now. And I don't see that happening. I mean, there is just so much research on the importance of play. Dr. Peter Gray is a wonderful source for that. He's a psychologist and done a lot of work on the link between play and joy. Oh, I can't. Pasi Sahlberg and William Doyle wrote "Let the Children Play."
I read that.
Isn't it
It
wonderful?
is.
Jam-packed with research, but not in a way that makes you go, "Oh my God, what are they talking about?" In a way that is so accessible and makes you go, "Yes." So, yeah, there are lots of sources for the research. I mean, right off the top of my head, all I can think about is the research on joy and the research on how the brain learns. I mean, we have a ton of research about the role of physical activity and movement, because we tend to think of the brain and the body as two separate things, and they're not separate at all. It's kind of a crazy notion. And I can't remember his name either, who wrote Spark, Dr. John Rady, who wrote Spark, about the science of exercise and learning. He calls movement miracle grow for the brain.
I
And
love it.
that's what it
That fits
is.
the ecosystem.
Yes. Yes, it does. It's perfect. It's a perfect analogy. When we do away with recess and children's outdoor time in favor of more instructional time, ah, we we are going completely against the research about the fact that the brain needs breaks, you know, that as Eric Jensen, who's written a bazillion books, you want research on brain-based learning, go to Eric Jensen as well. And he's said that the learning brain can only absorb like 10 minutes of stuff at a time. So making them sit longer for more instructional time is counterintuitive and counterproductive, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
we've got research up the yin yang, as they say.
Well, and it's then figuring out how do we translate that research into bites that our educators and our early childhood systems can understand, as well as our families in terms of understanding that importance. And thinking about the ecosystem again in terms of how that's set up. We know that movement is one of the things that we need to help children grow. We know that time in individual and group play is something they need to learn and grow. We know other conditions that we can help them with learning and growing is to observe their play and then bring it into those sort of 10-minute packets of inquiry where you can take what they're doing and say, I wonder, why is that? And how could we find out? And that's where you introduce the experiential element of it.
Yeah, exactly.
We know that read
Exactly.
alouds model fluency, language, provide windows and mirrors and sliding glass doors, thanks Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, that help our children see possibilities for themselves as well as appreciate other cultures that they may never experience, but
Absolutely.
you teach them
Absolutely.
young. We know that getting to play in pretend play corners activates empathy and self-awareness. All of these are scientific brain-based things that
Absolutely.
we should be doing
Absolutely.
at every opportunity.
I mean, when you think about, what it takes to be an adult and part of a community and part of the world, empathy is right up there at the top of traits that are necessary. The ability to cooperate and collaborate, the ability to resolve conflict, to solve problems. I mean, it doesn't matter what's happening with tech or, I mean, we can prepare them for keyboards now, but they're not going to be using keyboards when they're 20, for sure. Problem solving is the one skill they will absolutely need, and they're not going to learn it if they're doing rote learning, if they're doing memorization or worksheets or, clicking a mouse. That's not how they learn problem solving. Figuring out how to get the blocks up without them falling down. That's how they learn problem solving. Yeah, I think that we can provide the research for parents, but we don't want to be sending them whole articles. Just take a little highlight and include it in a packet or in your newsletter or your little app. A couple of lines, because it is important for parents to understand that the information isn't coming just from you, the director
Right.
of the preschool or whatever. Send home a quote like Einstein's play is the highest form of research. Help them see that a lot of really smart people are thinking this.
Well, and you can always provide, and one of the things I like to do is to do sort of just a brief summary with bullet points of what it
Bullet
says,
points are
and
great.
then give them a link if they want to go deeper, give them the
Yes.
opportunity to go into the
Yes.
article and read it themselves. But
Exactly.
you're highlighting and then you're creating what I call invitations. You're offering an invitation to learn a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, show them the photos, show them the videos of the joy that comes from learning the way nature intended the children to learn. I mean, because they want their children to be joyful.
And
It
there are
would
safe ways to do that now where you're not having to post it on social media. You've got things that are contained within your own group. When I ran my preschool, so this was before Seesaw and all of these other apps were out there. We literally used Shutterfly and we had a closed Shutterfly group so that parents would sign off at the beginning of the year. Yes, I give permission. No, I don't. If we didn't have photo permission, we didn't take pictures of their kids.
Mhm.
But we would post, if I was on my game, I'd try to do daily, like a few shots into the group. If I wasn't, then you got it at the end of the week. But it was enough to show them, that conversation at the end of the day is always rushed. And the
True.
kids don't necessarily go home and, when they're little, they can't always communicate what they did that day. And so
Right.
by sharing a few pictures with an explanation, this is what happened when we brought out the shaving cream and read this book. And we were working on letter sounds and things like that, but we were also playing with textures and.
Yes. Yes. Were you doing that by instinct? Or, I mean, it seems like you were ahead of your time 20
It
years
was
ago.
instinct at the time, and it was knowing my community because we were in a small town and we were the largest preschool in that town. And so inevitably, we sent almost 50% of the kids that went on to kindergarten to the local village school. And so I had come from UVA, which is where I did my doctorate. And in many ways, my preschool got to be my living lab. And so the things that I had learned at UVA that intuitively made sense to me,
Yes.
thanks to Reverend Doug Fisher and Grace Episcopal Church, I was allowed to test them out.
Yes.
And, and not testing it out with the kids as like little lab subjects, but
No, but I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do by working with the little ones. I mean,
exactly.
because you are, it's trial and error.
And we invited the families in too. So that was the other piece I learned is by having an open door where we welcomed parents in and we welcomed
Yes.
family members in to read stories, to help with snacks, to assist when we had rainy day games, because we would use the big open space in the church meeting hall. And we would bring out like the little Hot Wheel car, or not cars, but like the little trikes and stuff.
Mhm.
And the kids would get to play up there and we would organize obstacle games and we would play with the parachute, and it was that freedom of movement, as you said.
Yes, yes, yes.
Um,
And you're absolutely right that having an open door policy where the parents can witness this is critical, I think. And maybe where the administrators could witness it as well. And if you've got, the opportunity and the nerve, invite some policymakers in. Make them sit at those little desks and do worksheets. And then
I used to get the superintendent of schools because we were not a public school, but we were feeding all those kids in. And so I would get the superintendent to come in and at least once or twice a year, he'd come in for the morning and spend an hour playing.
oh, I
And
love it.
I felt that way at least what we were doing translated, and
Yes.
there was a greater understanding of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, if people are going to be making decisions about children, young children, they have to understand how special, how unique early childhood is. I mean, I'm always saying they're a whole different animal. You just because they've walked through the doors of an elementary school and they're preschoolers in a public place now doesn't mean they're just like the older children. In fact, up until grade 3, those children are more like, you know, kindergarten to grade 3, they're more like preschoolers developmentally than like their older counterparts. And I don't find that enough school administrators understand that.
Yeah,
Um,
and I certainly see that when I travel and do programs in schools because I'll do stuff for early elementary where I'm modeling the idea of linking picture books to STEM and STEAM. And often I still bring in like the Kapla Kiva planks and we play games and I give them STEM challenges. Like you have to build an environment for a penguin. What are the
oh,
things we know a penguin needs? And, they each have a kit of tools they can use and they're working with classmates to design their thing and they've got books
mhm.
to look at and see pictures and sort of think what would a penguin need to survive in New York
Oh my.
and because that brings it home to you're living in New York, it's
Yeah.
not the same as Antarctica. What are some of the things that we know? And what I find is the quality of talk that happens in the classroom when I do something like that. I'm the disruptor. I come in and I shift things from what they normally do.
I love it.
But the kids, the talk that happens in that moment is so powerful because they're making up stories. They start playing with their penguins and moving their little penguins around. And next thing I know, there are full penguin families. We've got games of moving the rocks up and down. We're sliding.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of joy that comes intuitively in preschool.
Yes.
But it's not as intuitive when you get to second and third grade, and those are the kids who really need it, and often their teachers will comment later, "Oh, wow, I've never seen that side of so and so," and it has everything to do with that's a child who maybe doesn't thrive in a sit at your desk and fill out worksheets, but is a leader when it comes to getting people comfortable and in a group,
Yes.
and that
Yes.
that trait also needs to be recognized and nurtured.
Absolutely. Observing children at play is probably the best way to come to understand them. What are their interests? What are their passions, even at that age? Where are they most curious? What kind of learner are they? Do they have to be touching things? I know the whole learning style thing has been debunked, but I'm much more of a visual learner and a kinesthetic learner than I am an audio person. So, yeah, you- watching them play is just the best way to come to know them.
Absolutely. So, if you could wave your magic wand and make one change for the world, what would it be?
I feel like the beauty contest contestant, beauty pageant contestant who wants to say, "World peace." I would ask for world peace. If I could wave my magic wand and make one change in early childhood education, it would be my mission. It is to follow child development, to let child development guide all of our interactions with them. If we understand child development, we don't ask them to read when they're 3 or to hold a pencil when they're 3. We don't ask them to sit when they're even 5, and sit still for understanding. It all comes down to an understanding of child development. So there, I'm waving my magic wand and
I
we're gonna
love that.
make that happen.
And in terms of, I think that we're in a culture of greater and greater burnout for teachers in particular. And I know a lot of that is the extra demands that are put on their plates. I think also anecdotally, I've seen teachers who are sort of with that wave of kids who were most affected by the COVID shutdowns, and they're
Mhm.
finding developmental delays and experiencing severe frustrations in how do we reach and help these kids?
Yeah.
How do we I get it's a two-part question, I guess. How do we help those kids and how do we help the teachers grappling with burnout?
Burnout is becoming more and more prevalent, as you say. what I want to recommend seems counterintuitive, but when I was researching my book, something about Spark a Revolution in Early Childhood, it's about advocacy. And I think that if you can find even the teeniest, tiniest way to advocate, and the suggestions that we've made for providing information to parents, that's advocacy. Asking someone to say childcare instead of daycare, that's advocacy. Pointing out the ways in which you're not a babysitter is advocacy. All of these little things that you wouldn't, it's not going and testifying before Congress, but it's all advocacy. If you can find a way to advocate in whatever way is comfortable for you, you're going to be more empowered. And with that empowerment comes more energy. I mean, we could talk self-care until we're blue in the face, and it's all important. But that's one little thing, one little difference, I think, that we can begin to incorporate.
I like that. And then in terms of working with the children who are sort of in that post-COVID state where they didn't get the time to play with other groups of kids, they were isolated in many ways.
Yeah.
How do we sort of help bridge that? Because those kids are struggling, some of them in school right now.
Yeah, they are. But I think if we just let them play, they're going to be fine. They'll find their way through that if we, set up those invitations for play and create those scenarios that make it possible and just love on them. It's going to be okay. I I think I mean I haven't researched it, but my gut feeling is that the reason those children are struggling is because so many parents, misunderstanding what they needed at that time, sat them in front of computers, for virtual learning, and not realizing that if they just let the kids play with their toys, they would be so much better off, you know?
And so maybe it is more of those opportunities to engage in collective problem solving and playful learning.
Yeah.
And that's hard to think about because school systems are looking at standardized tests and everything else. And it may be let's take a step back and look at what these kids need to develop as whole humans and know that
Yes.
the rest moves from there.
Well, and the research does show, Diane, that children who are in play-based environments, early learning environments, actually do better academically down the line than those who are in academics-oriented preschools. So we gotta push that message out there.
Exactly. So that's actually a great point. I want to transition for just a moment before I ask my final question. Rae, you have a number of resources that are available to folks. Can you describe them? And I'm going to drop links in the show notes for people, but just so they know how to find you and how you might be able to help them out.
Thanks. Well, everything they need to know about my work is at raepica.com, and they can sign up there for access to my free resource library. There are 20 downloadable guides, but I also have some more special downloadable guides and some online courses at raepica.teachable.com. I love creating the online courses. That's being able to reach the teachers that way has been wonderful. And I've written 23 books, so most of which are still in print. So those are, described on the website as well.
Wonderful. And we'll include links to that. So, last question for today. What brings you hope?
Oh, okay. What brings me hope? Well, I told you before we started that I'm a little bit fried. I always am at this time of year. I'm always thinking if I could just get through to Thanksgiving, I'll be okay. So it's hard to think about hope when you are burning out a little bit. What gives me hope is that I have a friend in Colorado who runs a nature-based childcare program out of her home. She's brilliant at it, and she can't even keep up with enrollment because she tells me more and more parents are coming to her for her philosophy. They're turning away from the academics-based programs, and it's her feeling that the tide is beginning to turn. So I hold on to that.
I
Yeah.
love that. Well, thank you for joining us today. Folks, you need to follow Rae Pica and Rae Pica's work. And I feel invigorated after this very play-filled conversation, so thank you.
I do too. I feel so much better. Thank you, Diane.
You've been listening to the Adventures in Learning podcast with your host, Dr. Diane. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, download, and let us know what you think, and please tell a friend. If you want the full show notes and the pictures, please go to drdianeadventures.com. We look forward to you joining us on our next adventure.